Welcome, everybody, to Huddle Up with Matias Bueno, episode 25. Today's guest is Canadian Football Hall of Famer, Winnipeg Blue Bomber Football Hall of Famer, as well as two-time Grey Cup champion with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, James Wild Wild West. James, it's a great pleasure to have you on today's episode. I'm super excited to have this conversation.
Oh, that's cool to hear, though, Matthias. I thank you for having me on, man. I think me and you both are doing the same thing, so I'm here to support you, and let's do what we do.
Absolutely. So we're talking a bit about the playing days. We were talking a little bit about the deliberation of all-star appearances and some of the, I guess, difficulties that guys ran into during your day and age when getting recognition for being all-stars, et cetera, because of some of the great players that you had as opponents, and as well as some of the teammates that you had that were in alternate positions that may not have traditionally fit into what they were on the game sheet. So can you talk a bit about some of the opponents that you played against who were some of the most outstanding guys that you saw on the other side of the football field when you played defense?
Well, you know what? Pertaining to defense, it's amazing that some of the guys that I didn't play with, were friends of them too as well, because game recognizes game. And I noticed a lot of those guys, but a lot of those guys played in different positions as I still work my way through this thing. Please forgive me. But, like for example, you mentioned the knowledge of who was an all-star during those particular times in the era of those positions that we played. And for like at least 3 years, I was not an all-star because they gave those positions to guys who played a position that were different from ours. And that was like James Parker. James Parker was one of the best players that ever played in CFL history, and he well deserved it to be a all-star. But if you base it on being those positions, then I would have had at least like 3 or 4, all-Canadian all-stars. At least I made some like regional or like East and West. When they say East and West teams, though, but the all CFL, I would have at least had like 3 or 4 more. But they considered that position that James Parker played as a linebacker, and it was not a linebacker. A linebacker is somebody that's multi-talented, which means you go down on the punt team, the kickoff teams. You'll play offense. You'll play defenses. Whether you're playing like, you covering receivers and slot backs and running backs, and you can blitz the run and all that sort of thing. That's a true linebacker, but with somebody just to rush the passer, that's not a linebacker. That's a defensive end. And so I'm not upset about it. I mean, shucks. I pretty much, received everything more so than I thought I was going to receive anyway in terms of what I did. I have no regrets about, the way my name on a piece of paper would look like in terms of what I believe I was, but other people did. So that's up to them to tell that story.
Yeah, and it's interesting how some of the great players that you play against on the same team as well as on the opposition are people that you become great friends with or are able to become connected with long after your playing career is done. And obviously you guys were able to first crack a Grey Cup title, the first in your career in 1988. So take us through what some of the feelings were going into that season and that game, considering that the Bombers were big underdogs against the Lions in that 1988 Grey Cup.
Well, I can tell you this. I came back to Canada after my experience with the St. Louis Cardinals, and I got recruited. I'm sitting up here looking at his name. I have those moments where I forget people's name. I'm glad. Paul
Robson?
Yeah, Paul Robinson was the general manager who came down to St. Louis and recruited me to come there. And I was going to give it another shot. As a matter of fact, I went to the Jets when I left, and I had a conversation with him because I wasn't ready to come back up there if I wanted to come back up there at all. I still wanted to play down in the league. But, my spirit led me to just go to Winnipeg. And had they known it, before, they could have got me for a whole lot of cheaper because I wanted to play in Winnipeg because I know there was an opportunity to win some championships over and over again. But primarily, the main reason I came there was to play with Tyrone Jones. We played in the same conference when we were in college, and I was 3 classes ahead of him. But I loved his game, and even more so when he started playing in Winnipeg. And I just felt like if me and him got together and played in any team, that we would have a great advantage, especially on the defensive side of the ball, to be really, really good. And so we didn't win a championship. I came back there in '85. and we didn't win it. Our best team that ever we had was 87. So we didn't win the first Grey Cup for myself personally until 1988. Tyrone won one in 84, but in 88 Tyrone left and went to the Cardinals. How about that? He went to the Arizona Cardinals where they at now and played that year. So one year he won it without me, and the other year I won it without him. And then in 1990 we won it together. But in 88, that was pretty much that. My whole plan for that entire year for me to get a championship beyond myself and Tyrone. Because normally, if you mention James West, the name comes back with Tyrone Jones. If you say Tyrone Jones, the name always comes back to James West. And so it just been like that forever because we were just closely in tune with each other. But we didn't have a combined body in 1988, but we did have a combined body in 1990. That was a great year. When I got that Grey Cup, I was the first one. I told everybody for the game we was going to win. But I said, now, when we win and they give up the cup, I'm just telling y'all right now, don't even think about putting your hands on it first because I am. And they respected me for that. They really did.
And that game in itself was super crazy considering towards the end of the game, obviously for those who may not remember that the Lions were driving. Matt Dunnigan was leading the offense to at least get a field goal for the tie or win the game. And then, the video of Mike Gray getting the interception and you jumping on top of him and like swinging and being super excited because the defense had just come up with a huge play to essentially secure victory until you guys had to go back on the field one more time. So, and you said that just before that many people didn't predict the Bombers to win, but you said that the Bombers are going to win the game. So what gave you the confidence to know that you guys were going to come on top despite the Lions being the favorites?
Well, all we know is that we wanted to operate in terms of our talents, okay? And so I don't know if you knew this or not, though, but during that year, our offense was the last in the whole entire league in offense. But our defense was the best team in the league on defense. And so it was a battle of like the two best teams and one of the worst teams. But we didn't see ourselves as characterizing ourselves as offense and defense. We was the Winnipeg Blue Bombers as a whole. But we just felt like our defense was much stronger than them, and they thought their offense was better than us because they did beat us down one time during the regular season. But I think they came in there with a little chip on their shoulder, and they thought that was all that in the bag of potato chips. But I think our mindset was we was better than them, and from the get-go we were. And as a matter of fact, I'm gonna give you an example how much better we was in that. They probably had about maybe about 4 or 5 first downs the whole second half. Our offense had one. As a matter of fact, they offense may have had more. They may have like 6 or 7 because we were 3 and outs the whole second half. But we just felt like we was a better team, and we were, and we beat them down. We really did, and we took the sting out of them. Although they made a last drive coming down there, our guys were not meant to fail that particular game. We just know the victory was always ahead of the time, and everybody believed that all the way through.
And especially another statistic that is important to mention is that you guys had 5 turnovers you created on defense in the second half, which despite having 1 first down or 2 first downs going 3 and out, creating turnovers clearly secures and wins championships.
Boy, you know your stuff, though. You keeping up with everything. You know it better than I do. So, yeah, but, I always say that defenses win games, not more so offense. I think if you're going to play basketball or baseball or whatever the case may be, you got to have a good defense in terms of those positions. And, I mean, I couldn't have played another position. I wouldn't have wanted to play offense because I wanted to attack. I don't want to be on retreat mode. And we were always on attack mode. We were, and we had an amazing coach at Mike Riley. He let us operate in our giftings. And, for us to, like, if he gave us a place to go, he didn't really care where that place was unless somebody, he put it into a format. Like, for example, I mentioned Tyrone a few minutes ago. Tyrone pretty much is the outside linebacker. I was the inside linebacker. And sometimes we rushed the passer, him primarily rushing the passer. But we used to change it around a lot. And nobody knew who to block because they didn't know who was coming because we got off the ball, stayed on the ball, moved to the side, this and that. And because our coaches, Mike Riley and Mike and Coach Padilla, for example, allowed us to do a thing. We confused a lot of guys. I can't tell you how many times I came scot-free because people pay so much attention to Tyrone because Tyrone was fast, he was quick, and he was something to be reckoned with. And he desired like 2 people to be able to block. And if there was any confusion, then one of us would come free. And that's how we succeeded with each other in terms of us winning that game too as well. Well, not that game, but we're pretty much us playing our whole career together.
You talk about that relationship you have with Tyrone and how when you guys were on the same team together, winning a championship really showed the true power of the defense. And I guess fast forwarding into the next question is that in 1990, you guys had basically one of the most dominant defensive performances in Grey Cup history with how many defensive touchdowns. Greg battled at a ton of turnovers. You and Tyrone both were flying across the field in defense, and everyone was talking that game about containing Tracy Ham and that was such an important thing to do in order to maintain success. But Tracy Ham was a non-factor for most of the game until the very end, and you guys were flying around. When you finally got to play together on the same defense in a Grey Cup game, that was a result of 50-11 win. So talk about how fun that game was and what you guys were talking with each other about, or what you guys were thinking during the course of that game, being able to fly around and make so many plays on defense.
Well, first of all, we were so competitive. We was competitive in practice. We was, competitive and more so than everything else. We competed against each other. Even if we were going down for a punt coverage team and we was arguing over who got the tackle or not, we were very competitive in everything we do, even with our own offensive team in practice. And we try to shut them down in practice, and they try to do the same with us as well. But the main point is that we consistently played better against teams that thought they were better than us. We were always much more competitive for, back in them days, maybe Ottawa or Saskatchewan up and down in terms of what they did, or even back in that day when Calgary wasn't good. I didn't play I think the best games I played was the more difficult games. And I think we were all so competitive. Our lights went up when the competition was told. And then we had arrogant people talking about we were going to do this and we're going to do that. And so we had it before the game started in 1990. We would pick to lose about like 7 to 10 points. And so we just felt like we didn't have nothing to lose. And so we partied on the plane there. It was like one of the most, it probably looked like to the common observer, they looked like the most unfocused team we have ever seen in our life. On the way there, we celebrating, we are walking around the plane and just like, but when we got there, as soon as we got off the plane, we celebrated it, and we hung out that day. But when the game got ready to be played, because we celebrated like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. But after that, everything was shut down, and everybody was on one accord. And that's what it took for us to be able to build what we really believed that we would win. And because we was all on point, nobody snuck out. I mean, everybody did, and everybody was in place on time. We followed each other, and that goes with leadership. I always wanted to be the first person there. So if I was going to be a captain, I wanted to lead. So I wanted to be sure if we practice start at a position time, if we're going to practice hard, we're going to do it right. I needed to be the person that presented that, and I thank God that I was able to be a captain for those guys and be able to lead them that particular way.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the importance of leadership, and even James Murphy talked about a lot with me that, having those values instilled from the coaching staff and the organization top down is really what helps to win and breed championship teams, especially when you look at how you mentioned were on one accord when playing against the Eskimos in that 1990 game. And having those great teams, it really is a result of making sure that the leadership has a strong set of sentiment in place of values and what the culture is when it comes to how to win, because you can't really win games if you're not focused, or if you're not all on the same team, or if you're not communicating well, right? So
right.
You guys were able to achieve a lot of that, and talk a bit about you people have mentioned that Mike Riley is someone that they would run through brick wall for. So talk a little bit about what Mike Riley did specifically to really get you guys into position to win games a lot. And also, what was it about his coaching style and philosophy that made him such a lovable coach for the players?
Yeah, I just mentioned ahead of time about Edmonton back in 1990. Tracy Hamden, that was a very good team. It was offensively, it was the best team in the league that particular year. But and what they ran, people wasn't able to stop. We watched a lot of film, and we knew exactly what they was going to do, and that's why you could see Greg. He looked like he was playing safety that day when Tracy Ham threw him that interception. He ran it all the way back, almost all the way back, but he did take one and run it back in that game because we prepared, because we knew exactly what they was going to do. And that was the fun part about our game, is that Mike knew everybody's talents on defense primarily. And we pretty much, we just hope that the offense would just not jack it up for us, like throwing interceptions and fumbles and stuff like that. They did a really good job on that. As a matter of fact, when we played that particular season in 1990, we led the league in punt returns. We led the team. We led the whole league. We led them in punt returns. We led the whole league in punt coverage. You know, you got to give people 5 yards before you can, hit right. They didn't even get 5 yards. They didn't even get 5 yards of return. It was like less than 4. It was like less than 5. I'm sorry, like 4.8 or something like that in terms of returns. And our returns was much more bigger than that. And so Mike was always recognizable more so primarily with defense and special teams. And we was number one in a whole lot of categories in terms of that. Because he really wasn't based on, offense and defense there as a team. Mike brought us together in terms of being a combined body, which it looked like it should be like here in the United States. We was a combined, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, we was a combined body there and we trusted him. As a matter of fact, when we lost the game, we felt sorry for him because he took it so hard, but we took it harder because we know that we had somebody we can trust in, and we felt like we let him down at any time we lost a game. But I can just tell you that in 1990, we never lost a game back to back. We didn't. No, we was just like, okay, let's get over it. Even if it was a bad loss or whatever the case, that didn't happen much. But we trusted so much in everybody that's led us doing that particular way. We just felt like they had our best interest, and they did. From Paul Robinson to Cal Murphy and everybody that was in those positions, and even our directors, those people put us in the position to be successful. I mean, we had no other reason not to believe we were going to be better.
Who would you say during those times that you were playing for the Bombers were the toughest teams that you came up against? Who are the hardest opponents that you really felt brought out the biggest challenge in yourself and also the team and the defense?
Are you talking about for a season, or are you just talking about overall?
Oh, either or. It could be overall, or it could be like within particular seasons as well.
Warren Moon was the best player I ever seen. Damon Allen was probably the most competitive guy I ever played against. He was always difficult to play against. As a matter of fact, I met Damon Allen before he came to the CFL, and we were friends before he came there. And even after the game was, I retired, and he played for another 30 years. We have continued to be friends. But I think the most competitive guy I ever played against was Damon Allen. The best offensive lineman I played against is, oh shoots, I would have been looking at his name, having one of those moments. He played in Hamilton, and I'm sitting up and looking at his name, can't even get it out. That's what happened when you get old. But anyway, no team. I can just say that we were always competitive. We just felt like we was better than everybody else for every team that we played. So I can't just tell you it was just like one team I particularly played against that gave us any difficulty, because some were and some were not. But we just always felt we were much better. But I just not primarily just thought one team would be better than us as a whole. But some individuals like Damon Allen that I mentioned, he was definitely one of the best players. And Warren Moon that I thought was one of the best players I played against. Two of the best.
When did you play? In what years did you play against Warren Moon? Was it just towards the tail end of his time in the CFL?
Well, in '82, I was in Calgary, so I played. Some people don't even know. Some people think I played my whole career in Winnipeg, but my first 3 years were in Calgary, and we were not a good team. I think we had a winning season like 1 out of my 3 years there, and it was nowhere anywhere imaginable close to the teams that I had in Winnipeg. And I'm not talking about by talent. I'm talking about, connectivity and embracing each other. It was too many clicks in Calgary at that particular time. I'm glad John Huffnagel is there now, because he just pretty much turned that whole organization around. And before that, what was the coach that was in BC before he went to Calgary?
Wally Buono?
Yeah, Wally Buono turned that whole program around. And then, of course, John Huffnagel came there and continued to make it continue to grow. But when I was with there, it was just like fatal. I mean, Jack Golder, who was my head coach there at the time, he would coach somebody for coming to practice late. And by the end of the week ahead of time, he rushed for like 200 yards or something like that. It was just like the most mundanest disconnect that I have ever played in, but I was able to get through that. But it wasn't a great experience, but, as I can say individually, I grew there. I grew there to become the person I was in Winnipeg, and even better.
So what were some of the challenges that you dealt with? You dealt with those first 3 years you played 82 to 84 in Calgary. What were some of the most difficult challenges you had to deal with as a young player in the CFL, and how did you rally around those experiences to allow you to grow into the player that you became when you were with Winnipeg?
Well, I think the reason why I don't degrade the time I was there in Calgary, that was probably my last opportunity to play a professional team because I had left there from the Raiders in 1980, and then I played a off season there with a semi-pro team playing safety. And the next year I was in Calgary, and I was the last one on board because here I am talking about I'm coming there to play safety or slot, slot back. They put me at rush in, and I definitely didn't want to play rush in. It's just a defensive end going rush the pass every down, and I was only reminded that I could do it because I did some of that in college. But when I got to the next level, I wanted to play linebacker, but they didn't want me to play linebacker. They wanted me to play rush in. And so I made the best out of it. And I grew in it. As a matter of fact, I complained about it, but I knew if I was going to make the team, I had to play the position. And I eventually won the spot there because it was like, I think I was named on the depth chart. I was number 9. But I worked everybody else. I mean, I worked my tail off. And as a matter of fact, that's why I benefited from everything because I worked out quite a bit. I was big and fast. I was big and faster than everybody else in that position. And when I looked at them, I know I had them beat. As a matter of fact, I used to let all of them go first. And the difficulty was saying somebody failed and for me not to repeat what they were doing. That's why I always see, well, if I can avoid something, I will. And when I seen somebody else suffer a struggle, I decided I didn't want to go that avenue. Now, those things happen. I think the thing that I struggled with, and it really wasn't a struggle, but it was probably just the disconnect of our locker room. Our locker room was like in little charts of people, like little waves. You had the guys who made this type of money, and then you had these guys that didn't want to hang out with somebody that didn't look like them, and then you had the husband and the wives club. And so I was in the husband and the wife club. So if one of the players had a wife, then we hung out with them at particular times. And it was just like a lot of cliquish stuff going on there. But I'm going to tell you, George Hopkins kept that thing there. If you know who George Hopkins is, he's been there for over almost 40 years now in terms of equipment manager. He kept us apart. And I really trusted, more so than any coach or any player, I've trusted in Ron Hopkins because he did a great job there in terms of keeping us all together and feeling like we was all worthy of our positions there.
And it's interesting that you mentioned how important it is for a locker room to be connected, and that element alone goes way farther than sometimes the pure talent that's written on paper. Because if you look at some of the teams in Grey Cup history that won being under 500, such as the first one being the 2001 Calgary Stampeders against the Bombers, them having that team chemistry and being able to rally around each other probably stemmed from stuff in the locker room. And if you don't have that, then it's really hard to be able to, even if you're the most talented team in the entire league, in order to be able to even find success. Because if you're not good with your teammates off the field, then what's going to happen when you're on the field and when you're experiencing struggles or challenges, or when you're in a game and you're losing and then people start pointing fingers at each other. And you can clearly see that there is a difference, especially even in the scope of Winnipeg's history, from when you guys were playing versus the years in which they didn't win the Grey Cup to more recent years when Mike O'Shea came in with Kyle Walters and with Wade Miller to be able to finally bring a championship after all these years. And so talk a little bit about what you saw in Winnipeg's Grey Cup win this last season and maybe some of the resemblance to some of the teams that you played with when you were here.
Well, I can tell you I was there. And so I enjoyed every part of it. It's funny and it's kind of ironic that I finished my career in Calgary only to come back and see, after almost 30 years, to see my team that I love so immensely, to come back and see them to win a championship there where I played my last and then lost a game there. And then afterward retired. And so I know the importance of keeping a locker room together. And there's 2 positions that you need to be reminded of in terms of connectivity. And that's a locker room and a huddle, a locker room and a huddle. And so if you don't, your foundation is the locker room. Your experience is actually playing inside the game. And so when you fuse those 2 cultures together, then they work. Some of the most beautiful things are people of color and people that are not of color, when they come together and then they have children. Those are the most beautiful children there are. And when you combine a locker room with the engagement of a huddle, we're all on board with each other. And that makes it such a beautiful thing that we trust each other and know how valuable it is to protect the other. But we didn't have that in Calgary, but we did have that in Winnipeg. And it was amazing. And it never ended from the top to the bottom. We always had those people who gave us an avenue where we could trust and believe that what they said and what they did, just as long as they give us an avenue to do what we did, what we did and be able to operate in that, we would be successful. And so everybody just felt like if they do their job, I think we was the first people that just say, just do your job. And so if you just did your job, we would be successful. And I think we really did an amazing over the level business. I wouldn't have chose another place to be in that time as to play with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
And so now with the success that they experienced last year, you can see some of that resemblance. And what was your experience like in terms of watching that game and seeing everything come together after all the years that the last time that they had, I guess, lost the Grey Cup was when you were playing there in Calgary way back in 1992?
Just a little disappointment about it there was I think we were not recognized like I need recognition. I don't need no recognition, but I think we were some kind of like wave to the side because there was always the illumination that since there hadn't been a Grey Cup in almost 30 years, the people that came around was kind of in the way of it, which is totally crazy for me. That's how I was suggested that would look like. But I never gave up on them. I was always connected to the team. I was there for the game. I've been there many times serving the Never Alone Foundation and other organizations coming in the city. I would always stop by and say hello, this and that. But you know, those last few years when I came there, I felt like I wasn't welcome. And it used to be the door used to always be welcome. And again, I'm not saying it's a derogatory kind of form of thing, but I just felt, and I know for a fact, I was not welcome there, and I felt like it more so than. And some people don't want to be remembered of their past; they want to do what they're carrying, and I'm okay with that. But we still the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, period. That's it. Because the fact is, I'm no threat, and we were no threat to anybody else. But when we came back there, we just felt and it may have been the fault of some of our guys because they wanted recognition. And some people just are insecure because see, football is pretty much their whole entire life. But I can just tell you that football is something I did. It's not who I am. And so my identity is not in football. And I didn't have to get recognized. But just for somebody overtly just say, well, you can't come here and come do there. But I'm just glad. I'm glad that their head coaches was there. I mean, they had really good head coaches. And in spite of all the crazy stuff that went around, I think last season was like the best team they probably have ever had. I mean, based on the circumstances they went through, they played like three of the best teams during the playoff surge. And because they beat all three of them, you know, nobody else did that before who wouldn't pick it because I think they was pricked to lose in all three of those games. And for them to win all the way through, I celebrated with them. And I still celebrate that today, witnessing them and me up there in the stands because I was in the stands of the Bombers. Of course, you obviously, right? And I stood, every time I stood up, I raised my hand, and the whole crowd behind us all stood at the same time. Some may have recognized me, maybe did, because, you know, it's almost like a spread when somebody noticed somebody. And I was there. That's the first time I really sat at a game as a fan. It felt like a fan and cheering the Bombers on. And it was excellent. So what they did and accomplished, I thought that was amazing. I really do. May have been the best teams.
And I like the point you mentioned about football not being your whole identity, and obviously that is an important element to remember when becoming a professional athlete. And even in James Murphy talked about when he was during his playing days, you know, people would recognize you very easily and on the street and be so in shock or see you as, you know, like a god or like you're untouchable. But as time goes on, eventually what happens is, you know, people only play football for a certain amount of time and then it goes away and they never play football ever again. And there's only so much that you can really live around the enjoyment of playing football. So talk about how you were able to transition from retiring from football to the next career that you jumped into, and maybe what the experience was like at first, wrapping your head around not being a football player anymore. And was it easy for you, or was it a little more difficult in the first few years?
Well, we talked about Calgary just a few minutes ago, and when we lost that game to Doug Flutie and that Calgary team, who were really, really good, I thought we could have played a little bit better, but we needed another year. That was our first year there, and of course, it went to win the BC Lions that particular year when I got traded. They just needed another year of season, and we just was not. We was a couple of players away from, you know, being even better than where we were that year. But we told Tyrone, me and Tyrone played together for our last time together. We played there together, and when we came to town, we told them, we guaranteed them that we was gonna make it to the playoffs. Because for the previous 3 years they did not. And so we went there with kind of like chips on our shoulder kind of people. And we believe that we would turn a situation around. But for me, in terms of retiring, when we lost that game, I could just feel when the game was over with. The locker room was full of the guys, but it's almost like it got kind of. I felt like it was experience inside that locker room that I'll never forget. It seemed like I didn't see none of the guys in there. And it was kind of weird to me because it was almost like God was like talking to me and say, okay, that's it. I'm like, oh, what? And do what? I didn't even hear anything, and I didn't hear anything. So for like 5 months, I sit around the house and didn't do anything because I didn't know what was next for me. And so I eventually went to, it's almost like, again, I had another one of those experiences, just say, go over there and where you came from. And where I came from, was Texas Southern. And that's where I played football for the first time. Because I don't know if you ever knew this or not. I never played football until I went to college. As a matter of every sport that I ever played, I got cut. I mean, I got Pee Wee, Pop Warner, junior high, high school. And then when I went to college, I went out for the team. So you know what happened, right? What happened? Tell me, you said yes?
No, I was just on my head in agreement, but you said you went out to college and
okay. So when I went out for the team in college, you know what happened, right? What do you think? I played 14 years, so what do you think? You got 14 in your back right there. I played 14 years. So if I went out for the team that first year in college, you know what happened, right?
Well, you would have to have made the team.
No, I got cut.
so then how did you rally around getting cut from the team? Like after all,
I went back out there. So I went back up there the next year, and like they say, the rest is history. And that's what I need to figure out then. I went and played. One of the most greatest decisions I ever made is to retire that year in Calgary when we lost to BC, and it was one of to Calgary, and when I lost that game, I found myself as a coach back at Texas Southern University where I played at, and it altered my life because what saved me on that campus, I was able to turn around and give it to others. And I've been doing that for the rest of my life. And if I didn't take that position, I wouldn't be in the position that I am now. So I'm doing the same thing I did when I retired outside of the game. And so let me just tell you this. Some people can be very impactful in the game and iconic at times, and they'll carry that game home for the rest of their life. And all they talk about is what I did here and what they did there. And, for me, it's uncomfortable because I realize football is something I did. It's not who I am. And so some people don't have that impact, but I guarantee you I've had more impact outside of the game than I have playing the game. And that's a lot of stuff. It really is. I've coached with Super Bowl teams. I've played with Super Bowl teams. I have speed dial with general managers still to this day on my phone with the NFL team, the CFL team. I have a list of people that I played against and just know them all as well. That don't really mean anything if you're not benefiting what something that was used for a moment to change and alter the lives of somebody else. And that's what I'm primarily doing now. I love what I do. As a matter of fact, they pay me for something I would do for free. And so that's what I think is much more of a benefit and be able to get through the game. But immediately, I can be honest with you, immediately I didn't really trust the process of me walking away and not knowing what I was going to do next. And some of those guys that are walking away from this game, it's even guys now in the peg. They're trying to figure out what's going to happen next now because they're not even 100% sure that there's going to be a game played next year. And so when you got that mindset, you need to figure out what are you going to do with your life? Because life is not about football 100%. Your life is about, okay, the greatest treasure in this life is not living, but it's dying, not finding out the reason why you really were here. And that first reason is not football. Football is an avenue to take us to our destiny. And destiny is pretty much something that you will do for free. So I'm one of those people. So
I love that you mentioned that. It's so powerful because there are, and having spoken with on a previous episode, Angus Reid, a former lineman of the BC Lions, who was a Grey Cup champion and then transitioned out of his football career and wrote a book talking about his relationship with Coach Dan Durazio, who was with him at the Lions, and the powerful message that he said that is in accordance with what you're saying is it doesn't matter what you do, it matters how you do it. And, football is only a part of your identity for a short amount of time, but it's not who you are. Who you are is a person that serves others, or who you are is a person that has values of responsibility or trust or honesty, etc. And so then how did you carry that transition after that first year of not knowing what to do? And in terms of what it is that you started to figure out what you were meant to do? When did you start to really hone in on what you knew that you were supposed to be doing after that first year of retirement?
I don't know if you ever heard this song by Madonna, but she played in this girls basketball league at the time. I forgot the name of the movie. But the song that she sang in terms of it being over that movie that she played in was "This Is Our Playground." uh, we don't stay in playgrounds our whole entire life. I mean, we grow up and then we move away and we start having families and and businesses and all that sort of stuff. We trying to find ourselves, and beyond that, if you can't find yourself, you'll be disgusted for the rest of your life in terms of what your process is. You begin to think that my whole life is just based on playing the game of football. Well, you know what? Everybody needs to make the game of football, but they wind up being doctors, lawyers, representatives, the people who would alter the world. And I think everybody should be, searching to go impact the world. I think this whole thing here need to be like this. Your vision of life should be based on this: restoring families, connecting to communities, reconciling cultures, and impacting the world. And I'm gonna tell you, there's a whole lot of people can't say that. I can honestly say I have used that vision, well, pretty much what our church says. Compacting, uh, connecting to our families, connecting communities. I'm sorry, restoring families, connecting community, reconciling cultures, and impacting the world. I've been all over the world, in many places, and people don't even know I played the game, but they see me as a person who gives an offer of love because I believe that their words are just like somebody felt like we were words that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers were. And so I can just tell you, it wasn't difficult, but it was just misunderstanding that I didn't really get. And for like 6 months, I had a misunderstanding about what's for me next because I had no idea. Because I majored in nutrition, and that wouldn't have paid me enough. I had no idea. I should have majored in communication because I ran my mouth too much. But I was, but I did that and did an internship there, and I didn't really enjoy it. So I just finished school and tried to get a football in the arena. And of course, when I got cut those times, I didn't give up. So I got cut many times. I got cut by the Raiders when they won the Super Bowl. I got cut by St. Louis. I got cut, you know, in another. Well, those all the all the other places that led up to it, like high school and college and all that sort of stuff. But I was always a fighter, and I am still to this day. That when somebody see me, they can still think they have hope.
So it definitely really bodes well that when you understand the importance of service to your community and you talk about service to others and people not even recognizing you for having played the game, but as a person that they can really see an inspiration in. I think that really is something that is important for football players to understand, or for any high level or professional athlete, because there's only so many of them that will play for over 10 years even. And even if you play for 10 years in the CFL, you're not going to become generationally wealthy like you're playing in the National Football League. So having that football as that vehicle to inspire others or to impact others long after the game, I think is something that is more powerful than anything that you could do, even if you won a Super Bowl 4 years in a row or any of that stuff, because who you are matters more than what you did in football. And your character is the most important thing that I've learned, especially from my experience in playing football, is seeing guys who are very successful or talented, but then as the years go on, you realize that they don't have good character, or that their accolades start to fade, and you start to realize that they're not a person you want to be around, no matter how good they were at football. And it's such a tragedy because there's so many people that have that powerful name and have that reputation to make it easier for them to impact others, but then they choose not to. And so when you talk about this service with how you, I guess, what it is in your life that you do now, when you look back on the connections that you have with old teammates or players, how have you found that has blended with the service and the impact that you've reached out to make on others? Have you found that there's a lot of synchronicity between you and former teammates and opponents and players in terms of this mission and vision that you have?
Well, first of all, you got to define about who you are, because people live their lives in like three different ways. And I can start all of them start with an S. Some people live their lives in a survival mode, because even to this day, people worry about what's happening in the world, and some people worry about what they're going to eat next, and if they're going to have a job when this pandemic is over with. And it's a whole lot of confusion, and now your families are disconnected to in the family, which goes back to what I told you earlier about being connected to your family. No matter what it takes, your family is much more important. The other one would be a success mode. Success is when you get all this money and then you think that you're on the top of the world right now. But I'm gonna tell you, man, like even scripture tells us that like a rich man is like a camel getting in the eye of a needle. You either navigate is what he says. Either need to navigate because why is the gate that leads to destruction? And because people think because they get money, then that's automatic success for them because money is damaging. As a matter of fact, the more money you get, the more you disconnected from a wife or husband or family, something like that, because you think you can borrow for everybody for everything you need to do. We didn't make a ton of money. I think I was probably one of the highest paid linebackers there, but me and Tyrone kept going when it was our year to get contracts. We kept overlapping each other here and there. And it wasn't a matter of just like a few $1,000s, but we wasn't making like the money. They made more money in probably like the first 2 games in NFL that we made all season. Like the current NFL. And so, but we enjoyed each other. We loved each other immensely. But the last portion of this, a survival, a success, the one that's most important is a significance. And I'd rather have a significant, role in terms of what I'm doing. I want to be, when somebody looked at me that would look like somebody would help, would understand, to be able to talk, would able to love, would be able to understand, what's more valuable at this moment right now when we having this conversation. Is it you or is it me? Or what would we do to design ourselves to feel like we did something that operates only that somebody that would look like us, who wants us to look like him to be a part of, and that's God, and that's why I am where I am now. And I'm not even religious. I'm relational, and that's what happens with me because I think everybody should be looking for opportunities to make somebody smile on a daily basis. And if you can do that, your day should be good, and you'll continue to grow. Let me just tell you this. I don't know if you, and I don't even know where you are with your script, your life and this and that, or what you believe in this and that, though. But I just tell you, you probably know this for a fact. You've heard this many times. It's much more is blessed than to give than it is receive. Well, the reason why that is a factor is because the more you give, the more you're gonna get back in return. People don't understand that process. It's almost like a covenant relationship. If you give, the more you give, the more you get back in return. But some people just want to cling on to their halves and what they believe they have more than, and it's always like a race. And that's what it is, race. Life should not be about a race. It should be like a combined body. Let's get in the car and go to the same place. And until that happens, we probably gonna still be in state of mind, especially here in a capitalism state that mind that we have here at times.
And it's such a true statement that you mentioned about significance and about the ways in which people can have an impact on others, and that there needs to be that meaning, right? There's that famous quote that goes, everybody dies, but not everybody truly lives, because like you mentioned before, sometimes people don't understand the purpose of what it is that their life's calling is meant to be, right? And there's books and stories about finding your purpose. And there's actually an interesting book that I read by a great Brazilian author by the name of Paulo Coelho, who tells a story of finding your purpose through this book he wrote called The Alchemist. And essentially he starts out with a bunch of sheep and he's living in a church in southern Spain. And what happens is he has this dream that he's supposed to travel to the pyramids to find this amazing treasure. And he travels all the way through northern Africa, through many of these mystical lands, goes through the deserts, finds a girl he loves, almost faces death with a tribe that from the desert, to get all the way to the pyramids, to be nearly beaten to death after this tribe group comes by and tells him, "You fool, we're going to find the real treasure. It's at this small church in southern Spain." And then he realizes that the treasure that he was looking for was where he was from the entire time. And he goes back and finds that what he was looking for, he had right underneath him the whole time. And I think that that's what happens with people in their lives, is that they think that they don't understand it's closer than it is too far. And especially when it comes to, the simple acts that you can do that provide significance to your life and also help others are, volunteering or helping out coach or commenting something nice to somebody, or saying something nice to somebody, or helping someone out with something that in a way in which they can't really help you in return. So having these genuine acts of kindness, and the other point you mentioned is about when you give, is that you get in return. When you genuinely give and you keep giving, then it just creates a cycle of reciprocity that helps everybody out, rather than clinging on to those last few things that you really, really want, or the amount of money, because money is obviously finite, right? Money is a vehicle that can be used for good or evil, and that the person that is developing their character is going to be able to dictate whether they use that for good or evil. So it's very interesting you bring up those points. And so in terms of how you find the work that you do now, what are the best things that you enjoy about what it is that you do in the present day, with your ability to serve and your ability to impact the community and others?
Man, it's funny that you mentioned that too, because that's what I'm working on right now. I need more resources to do what I do, and sometimes it's difficult that I work in an urban footprint, and people of color are like 50 generations behind time. Of course, all the way from slavery back 400 years ago to now, and it's difficult to get like resources out of here. But relationally, I'm able to function because we are a organization that needs to raise our own money to work on our own job, that we get the money back in return. But it's funny you mentioned that too, because what I'm doing now, I'm going to put some stuff on. I don't know how I'm gonna do the avenue, but all my rings, my jackets, my helmets, trophies, watches, like in a new Eskimo carvings. If you can see back there in the back, you can see some intimate Eskimo carvings. And those things are probably worth about like $30,000 like right now. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm trying to find an avenue is I'm getting rid of all of them, which pretty much just what I'm telling you, what I already told you before. Those are not, I mean, that's something that I did. What I need to carry around that I can change the life of somebody else. And I'm trying to find a way to do it. And I've been thinking about this since last Friday. And when I was out there running one morning, and I know that there's a race that I needed to take care of, because the way I keep my core tight is to sprint. And it don't have to be a lot of sprinting. So I can just run up a hill for like 30 seconds, and that's a sprint. And then it keeps my immune system high, so I can get a flat stomach. That's why I'm more interested in my core area. But the core is the core of the gospel is to go ye and make disciples and help people out, pretty much. And that's the identity of God's connectivity toward us. And so he pretty much has an agenda that he wants to operate. And I want to do it more. And I know he got all these resources for me, but sometimes it's hard and difficult to ask. And so we got to still find our ways, because some people were maybe interested in a helmet and donate $50,000 for a helmet. So I got all this stuff in the house. So you'll see that. So that's a helmet. And then next to that, you can see that's Tyrone Jones. Who wouldn't want something like that? And so over here is this here is like way older than you. This is like a Labatt's. I don't even know if the Labatt's is still operable there in Canada. Labatt's Blue. This thing, that's a trophy I won. And these are the Eskimo carvings right here. Can you see those?
Yeah.
That's an Eskimo carving right there. And so I got all this stuff, and I got a whole lot of other stuff that I just don't put out, because it'll make me look like I'm still into the football game-ish. And so I'm getting rid of some of this stuff, because I think it's much more beneficial to others, just to them that don't, so to offer these up and still be able to do more with those resources, because that's what I want to do now. And I was just like last Friday. As a matter of fact, I already made a video that I was going to do that. I said, anybody want to offer it? And if you look at it, I'm not sure if you're on Facebook or not, but I put it out there this morning about just one thing. It was a bleacher. You know what a bleacher is, right? But they took those chairs from the old stadium, and I ran into it in the garage where the idea came up, and if I need to go and sell what I got, because it's laying around in the garage somewhere. And it was a seat. And I had a lot of autographs from guys who played with the Bombers. And they got the name, and I showed somebody, and I put it on Facebook, and I said, does anybody know what this is? The majority of people didn't know what it was, but some did, and they asked me, could they purchase it? And that just led me to think, well, I need to go ahead with it, and I think I will. So I'm doing all that to still go to places like Guatemala, Kenya, places in Canada where I go to the Never Alone Foundation, the awareness connectivity in Edmonton, which is an autism fundraiser. So I do all stuff like that. I'm on the board here with like movers and shakers, where people really don't have any furniture. And people who have furniture, they seal it out like every 2 years. And we go pick it up, and then we give it to people who don't have anything. And so I'm just like constantly just trying to find avenues and ways so I can be connected people to pretty much help them out along the way. Now we just don't go like overtly right into and say, well, you need this, you need that. Well, people are always asking, and if we're available to do those things, we do it. And I think that's going to be a good avenue. I hope it comes out well.
For sure. And you mentioned the Never Alone Foundation, and that was a credit to, I believe, Lyle Bauer, a former
Yes.
teammate of yours, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you can talk a bit about what work he's done with that organization in relation to what you've been able to help out with.
Well, I'm glad you said that. As a matter of fact, because Lyle, I think you have to go through something before you can learn anything, right? And the Never Alone Foundation is pretty much supporting people who live with cancer, and either if they're at the point of death or they're in a place where they need support. And because of the Never Alone Foundation, what they all connected to build, I think Lyle had a major part in it. If you don't really go through anything, how can you understand and have empathy for anybody? And so it's kind of difficult for a billionaire to want to go hang out with a group of people who's sleeping outside. They'll throw them a crumb here and a crumb there, but it's kind of hard to have empathy. But if you personally have been through something like that, it changes alter your whole entire life. I myself, because of the difficulty trying to play the sport, and also I grew up in a housing project. My dad got killed when I was 13 years old in an accident at work. We struggle a lot. We didn't have a lack thereof. All my brothers were better athletes than me. They were like D1 athletes, and I was the only one in the family who was horrible. But I eventually made it, and I thank God for calling me into the position I am. But places like the Never Alone Foundation, and like I said, the artistic fundraiser there in Canada, those are the places that I'll go, because like when I go to like places like Guatemala and Kenya, I don't do it as a mission trip, because what happens when you go on a mission trip, you confuse people, because you come there for a minute and you leave them behind with nothing else. You know what I mean? You may go buy them something and give them a meal, this and that, and you never see them again. That's called a mission trip. But a mission project is when you connected to you'll donate to a project or you'll support a kid here. And I'm still doing that to this day. And so that's what I feel like. You just can't go just drop something off and just say, okay, well, you're going to be all right. I came and said it. I shared the scripture with you now. Let God's will be done. No, you need to overtly just get right into somebody's face and say, I'll be there and I'll help you as much as I can. And that's what the Never Alone program is doing with their Loud. And it's been amazing how much money have they raised and how many lives they've changed, or help people to get over the difficulties of a person that they know was getting ready and prepare them for death. And so that's difficult. I just can't imagine myself seeing anybody die. I hope I don't even see it. I can hear about it, but I hope I never experience that.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see the charitable works and the great mission, that great projects that are done with former teammates or people who are alumni of the league, or former opposition as well, because there comes that point where the bonds that is created amongst CFL alumni is more important than what happened in the trenches, right? Like the connection you have with someone like Lyle years after you're done playing, and the impact that you guys can have on people's lives together is more important than the X's and O's and the stats and then this and then that, because those are the things that, they are what they are for the rest of time, right? Whether it was great or whether it was not, but the impact that you can have can always be changing and always be growing and always be continuing to spread to other people, and can always be helping others in a great way. And it's always so inspiring to hear of the work that alumni do, especially within their communities and within communities in the, or I guess within broader communities outside of their country or outside of their city. And that's why it's super inspiring to hear what you guys have been able to accomplish since the time you guys have finished playing.
Well, I can tell you one thing. I absolutely love each one of my teammates, especially in Calgary and Winnipeg and every other place, because I've still contacted at least somebody who played with the St. Louis Cardinals or the Oakland Raiders or the BC Lions or the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I've still connected to some of those people, and I absolutely love them all. I never did love one person or the other unless it was Tyrone Jones. Pretty obvious that you couldn't say one name or the other one, but of course he passed away, but I'm still connected to his family here in Georgia, and I have conversations with them regularly. As a matter of fact, I just talked to his brother on yesterday. And so I just think, again, like me and you right now, Matthias, you getting on this call, and I just think people are meant to be able to connect with each other at one point in the time to see where that goes. And that's what happens with us. And I trust and believe that there's some goodness in everybody. But they got to understand that, some people that in the midst of their worst times, that somebody just need to sometimes just say, well, you know what, it's going to be all right, or or help you, or just suggest any kind of piece of love is what people are designed to have. And that's, I hope that when I see people, I hope I continue to offer up that offer of, and I'm not perfect by all means, I'm not, but I just hope that somebody look at me, they will look at somebody they would love to, to say hello to, or return, whatever the case may be, and their life would be changed some kind of way.
For sure. And I was going to say, James, we're getting towards the end of our time here. And before we wrap up, I wanted to ask one final question. And before the conclusion of this episode today. So the final question I have to ask for you is, obviously, with having played for Winnipeg for most of your years and with all the teammates that you met, who is the funniest teammate that you ever played with during your time in Winnipeg?
Duh. Duh. It's obvious Tyrone. Me and Tyrone used to make jokes against each other like so much. I can't tell you the story. We'd be on here for another hour. I'll tell you about Tyrone, but I'll tell you one part. When I first came to Winnipeg in 1985, they had a game, a hockey game over there. And when Tyrone walked into the building, it's this guy just dived down on his feet and started kissing his toes. And then all these people started coming around. I'm like, what the heck is this about? It was almost like they worship him there. And he stayed there and let him do it. I walked away. I like, man, I said, I never want that type of attention because I didn't get it nowhere else. But what we come to name that, so whenever we went out or went somewhere, people would always see us together. And I kind of figured that they kind of figured out who I was and where I was at, and I came back. And so it was always that they talked to us both all the time. And we joked all the time. We even joked during the game. I mean, we was talking about people's mothers and girlfriends and all that sort of stuff during the game. And they were livid. As a matter of fact, I can just tell you it was Tyrone, because Tyrone used to literally just make people so mad, they forgot about their assignments. And because they were paying more attention to him, I had so many plays that I made because Tyrone was getting recognized. They were paying more attention to him than it was to me, and it was always so funny. But I just an amazing life. I just had one of those moments on yesterday when I just cried because I was just thinking about him when I was telling you about that movie and that song about, that was our playground. And back then, that was our playground. I mean, and, life changes and, people try to discover themselves and just have more memories than regrets. And so I have more memories with Tyrone than I have any other person that I ever played that game with. And I still enjoy it still today by sending this out, by keeping this in my constant face right here every day. This is what I got. And, I can just always pull this out right quick. When I walk into this room, I can always see his presence. And I just know he's in a really good place. And so I'm okay with that, but it was difficult for me at times because I had to separate myself from Tyrone because he had got himself in a very highly difficult position. And it was no rescue. It was nothing I could do for him. But when he passed away, I was really hurt by it because I wasn't there for him, and I couldn't do anything for him. If I had to start over, it wasn't nothing else I could do for him. But it was just a very difficult time when I had to separate myself from him. But I know where he's at, and I'm safe with that at this time. Yes.
And that's very inspiring and always touching to hear about the impact that having such close friends as the same teammate on the same line as yourself is always such a great treasure, because you can never take for granted the opportunity that you have to have a relationship with someone like that, especially because that's not guaranteed for everybody or for most people. And to say that your best friend is someone you played alongside with on every snap is not something that many people could ever say. And that's why it's such an important thing to have that relationship always near and dear to your heart, and to always remember and to, like you said, have more memories than regrets. And each person is in control of their own destiny, and people can't cross over and interfere, but at the same time, everything that you've had with him will never change and will never go away, and it'll always be able to hold that close to your heart. And that's why it's so great to see the impact of having played together goes far beyond the Grey Cups and the tackles and the interceptions and all the accolades, because it's what you build in your life with that person that continues to be the greatest memory that you have with them.
Right. And let me just tell you this last thing though. Me and Tyrone, not only we competitive against each other, we became competitive against each other, although we played together. And so uh, we had different coaches at different times. When I came there, Fred Glick was our linebacker coach, and he loved Tyrone. And he gave Tyrone all of just everything in the locker room. Oh, Tyrone, look at Tyrone here, look at Tyrone there. And I'm like, dude, I made a play. You ain't saying nothing about me here, you know. And we kind of get envy. And then when he left and took a head coach's job with Ottawa, then we had a new coach that was Bob Baddiel. And Coach Bob Baddiel loved me more than he did Tyrone. So I was getting the recognition. And Tyrone kind of got upset about it. And that's why he went to the NFL, which he had to do anyway. I don't think that was the case. But what I mentioned to you earlier as I'll close out with this conversation is that we separated from each other. We went and both grew. And then we came back and finished our career in 1990 with the BC Lions. And that was probably like the best closeout for being with him than I ever could have experienced. Even in Winnipeg, we closed out somewhere else and did our own thing there. And we still did the same thing in BC by saying when the season started, y'all gonna wind up in the playoffs. And they did. And the next year they won the Grey Cup.
Well, there you go. You guys built the foundation and paved the path for the Lions to win their iconic 1994 Grey Cup against the Baltimore Stallions, which was the first Grey Cup featuring an American and a Canadian team playing against each other. So those memories are the ones that will last a lifetime. And with that, I want to thank you, I want to thank you so much for sharing your stories today, James, with Tyrone and with everything you do with the Bombers and with how you can be of impact by providing service to others and being a member of your community and having significance. Everything you've said today has rung so true, and I've had so much fun being able to speak with you today, James.
Oh man, it's a pleasure, man. I wish you nothing but the best for yourself, man. You're gonna be really your features and everything in your conversation going to attract a whole lot of people, man. Be sure you take advantage of it, all right? For your good. I wish you nothing but the best.
Well, thank you again so much, James. And thank you again, everyone, for listening to today's episode, number 25, with James West, Winnipeg Blue Bomber, Canadian Football Hall of Famer, two-time Grey Cup champion.